So in our first lesson, we're going to be looking at the description text structure. And this particular structure is used to inform about certain topics by describing them through the use of details. Typically, an author is going to use this particular structure to present information to the reader about a particular topic, maybe even tell you why something is being described, as well as why the described topic is important. And then finally, they will provide examples of the described topics. The most common places where you will see this style of text structure used would be in novels, works of literary nonfiction, newspaper articles or periodicals, as well as the textbooks that you use in a school or work professional development training setting. A descriptive text is typically written in the format of a topic that is being described by listing characteristics, features, and examples within the writing passage. Typically, a descriptive text is going to focus on one particular topic. It could be one thing or idea that the author is providing information on, and then providing details about the components of the topic. When working through a descriptive text, it's important that you ask yourself questions. So as we see, some common questions that we could ask as we are reading a descriptive text will be, what person, place, idea, or thing is being described? Maybe we could ask, how does the author organize the description? And then finally, going back to our topic of main idea and supporting details, we could ask about what details the author is using to support the topic that they are discussing. What details do you see that the author feels are most important? When reading a descriptive text, it is important to look for specific signal words. These are going to be clue words that will appear in the text, and you can use those to quickly identify that, the author is writing a description here. These are by no means an exhaustive list, but some of the most common descriptive signal words that you will see are such as, is like, looks like or sounds like, for instance, including, for example, and to illustrate. When we see those key words or phrases, that will signal to us that the author is providing a description about the topic. Let's look together at an example of a descriptive text. A day at the pond. The pond was a beautiful place to visit. The falling leaves, all different colors, decorated the surface of the water. At the edges of the pond, small wildflowers grew. The golden forest glowed faintly in the distance. In this example, we are going to use a web to help us determine what details the author is presenting to us to reinforce the topic. So what we're going to be doing is very similar to finding the main idea of the text and the details used to support that idea. In this case, we need to think about what this passage is actually about. So our topic sentence is, the pond was a beautiful place to visit. Okay, so this entire passage is the author describing why the pond is a beautiful place to visit. So our topic, right here in the center, is the pond. Now, what are some of the details the author uses to describe this scene at the pond? Well, we see in the first sentence that he states that the pond is beautiful. Okay? He talks about the falling leaves. More descriptive language about the pond itself, or the scene at the pond. He talks about the small wildflowers that grew at the edge of the pond. The forest glowing in the distance. So we have our golden forest that glowed faintly in the distance. Different colors of leaves. So all different colors. And we, of course, already pointed out the golden forest. So, the details provided are that the pond is beautiful, falling leaves, the small wildflowers, small wildflowers on the edge, the golden forest, and specifically that it glowed in the distance. And then finally, the colors of the leaves. So each of these details are describing why the pond is beautiful. So every sentence in this passage is supporting this author's opinion that the pond is a beautiful place to visit. Icebergs. Icebergs, giant blocks of ice that float in the sea, come in many shapes, sizes, and colors. Some are deep blue or green. Some look like floating sculptures. Old icebergs that have been worn down by the weather sometimes look like pillars of ice. Usually only about 1/5 of an iceberg appears above the surface of the water. The other 4/5 of the berg is hidden underwater out of sight. Sometimes an iceberg has what is called a foot, an extension completely underwater. These are especially dangerous for ships. It was an iceberg foot that sank the Titanic in 1912, killing 1,503 people. So once again, we are going to use a web to see how the author describes the topic of this particular passage. In this case, our topic is rather easy to figure out. Okay, so our author is writing about icebergs, and this particular passage is intended to inform us about what icebergs are. So we know that they are giant blocks of ice that float in the sea. that is our topic. What details in the passage support this topic? All right, well, we see that some of the key words that are used, they come in many shapes, sizes, and colors. There we go. Come in many shapes, sizes, and colors. We see that he uses phrases like look like, appears. So all of these are all dealing with visual details. So we start to get this mental image, if we've never seen one before, of what an iceberg actually looks like. Some of the details that are provided in the passage, we see that he says that they are deep blue or green. Some look like floating sculptures, pillars of ice, and then 1/5 of the iceberg appears above the surface of the water. Other 4/5 is hidden underwater. And then we find out about a thing called a foot, and it was an iceberg foot that sank the Titanic. So let's input our details from the passage. So we're told that they are deep blue or green, floating sculptures is another detail that's used to describe the iceberg. Pillars of ice. And we're told that 1/5 appears above the surface of the water, and the remaining 4/5 are underwater. And then finally, the foot sank Titanic. So in this particular passage, we are given quite a bit of information about icebergs. So the author is making sure that each of the details points back to let us know what icebergs are, and to also give us additional information about how icebergs could potentially be dangerous for ships that are sailing on the water.